The battle that changed everything in the desert summer 1942. The British Eighth Army is running for its life. Or when Rommel, the legendary desert fox, has just smashed them at Gazala, and his panzers are charging eastward like an unstoppable tide. The Suez Canal is within reach. Beyond that, the Persian oil fields that fuel the entire Allied war effort. If Rommel breaks through, Britain loses the Middle East. If Britain loses the Middle East, they might lose the entire war. But then something extraordinary happens. At a dusty railway stop called El Alamein, the British decide to make their stand. What follows is one of the most brutal, grinding battles of the Second World War. A battle that looks more like the trenches of 1916 than the mobile warfare of 1942. A battle that will prove, once and for all, that the tide has turned. This is the story of how the Allies stopped running and started winning. And trust me, it's absolutely gripping. Let's set the scene. After getting battered at Gazala, the British commander Claude Auchinleck makes a crucial decision. Instead of falling back to establish defensive lines further east, he positions the Eighth Army near El Alamein. Now, why there? Because of geography. On one side, you've got the Mediterranean Sea. On the other, you've got the Qattara Depression, this massive low-lying salt marsh that heavy armor and vehicles simply cannot cross. It's impassable. What this creates is a bottleneck, just 40 miles wide. Suddenly, Rommel's ability to do what he does best, those brilliant flanking maneuvers and rapid movements, is severely limited. He's funneled into a narrow corridor where British firepower can actually stop him. And it works. During the First Battle of El Alamein, the German advance finally grinds to a halt. Both sides are absolutely knackered. They've been fighting for months across hundreds of miles of desert. Now they're licking their wounds, planning their next moves. But here's the thing. The British are planning A, and when it comes, it'll be unlike anything seen in the desert so far. By the second half of 1942, the Axis forces in North Africa are in a right state. Germany's main priority is Stalingrad. Everything's focused on that bloody city battle. Panzer, Army, Africa. They're basically an afterthought. They'll get proper support once Stalingrad falls. Until then, they're on their own. But it gets worse. Whatever supplies Germany does allocate have to cross the Mediterranean Sea, which is increasingly contested by Allied naval and air forces. Then those supplies have to be driven along the coast to the front lines. We're talking distances comparable to Warsaw to Moscow. Absolutely massive logistical challenges. And then there's Malta. This tiny island fortress in the middle of the Mediterranean that Germany never managed to capture. It's a thorn in the Axis side, allowing British forces to intercept supply convoys. The result? There's never enough petrol, oil, food, or most crucially, water. The Axis forces are stretched impossibly thin. Meanwhile, the British Eighth Army gets a new commander. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. Monty, as he'll become known. He brings reinforcements, fresh equipment, and most importantly, a plan. Rommel knows reinforcements are coming and tries one last desperate attack to reach Alexandria before they arrive. But his exhausted troops are beaten back at El Halfa. Now the stage is set for a proper British counterattack. But Montgomery doesn't rush in. He's methodical, almost obsessively so. Over the next few months, he builds up his forces into something truly formidable. British troops, Indians, South Africans, New Zealanders, Australians, Greeks, Rhodesia, all training together, preparing for the offensive. Supplies pour in from Britain and the Indian subcontinent, and crucially, American weaponry starts arriving. Tanks like the M3 Grant and the Sherman begin to tip the balance against Germany's heavier armor. By the time Montgomery's ready to attack, the Allies have a significant numerical advantage, but Rommel's not sitting idle. Without the men or materiel to fight a mobile battle, he takes advantage of the defensive terrain and creates what he calls Devil's Gardens. Millions of mines mixed with anti-personnel mines. These minefields stretch up to 9,000 feet deep, covered by barbed wire, trenches, and anti-tank guns. German and Italian infantry hold the front lines to contain any attacks, with armored reserves in the rear to prevent breakthroughs. It's a formidable defensive system, but there's a problem. Due to fuel shortages, once the armor has been deployed to counter an attack, it can't be redeployed elsewhere. The Axis forces are locked in position. In September, Rommel's health forces him to return to Germany. His deputy, Georg Stumm, takes over. Montgomery uses this time to train his inexperienced men in night fighting and mine clearance. But more importantly, he works on morale. Montgomery's an eccentric character, white noblesse showing under his shorts. Clearly not your typical stuffy British general. At first, his men aren't convinced. But Montgomery understands something crucial about warfare that many commanders miss. Morale wins battles just as much as firepower does. He meets with his troops constantly, passing on supreme confidence in the possibility of victory. By the time the battle begins, everyone believes this is their moment. Montgomery's plan is straightforward, built on overwhelming superiority in firepower and numbers. 13th Corps will make a feint attack in the south, while 30th Corps makes the main attack in the north, breaking into Axis defenses and clearing paths through the minefields. Then 10th Corps tanks will advance through the gap, forcing Rommel to deploy his armored reserve, which will break itself attacking superior British forces. Meanwhile, Axis infantry can be systematically destroyed. The battle's preceded by brilliant deception operations. Dummy tanks and guns are built up in the south. Real tanks in the north are disguised to look like trucks. And Montgomery has another ace up his sleeve. Intelligence. Earlier in 1942, Germany and Italy had been reading messages from an American diplomat in Cairo describing British strength and dispositions. Massive intelligence advantage, but that source was closed off in June. From that point forward, the intelligence balance swings decisively toward the Allies. Ultra decrypts. Montgomery learns detailed information about German and Italian supply difficulties, force dispositions, everything. It's absolutely crucial intelligence. On the night of October 23rd, the Second Battle of Alamein begins. The sky lights up with a massive barrage intended to soften up Axis positions. It's so loud it's heard 60 miles away in Alexandria. Next, engineers go forward to clear the minefields. Difficult, dangerous work. The minefields prove much deeper than expected, meaning infantry with supporting armor have to spend longer under German and Italian artillery fire than planned. Losses are high in both men and machines. The attack starts to stall, but Montgomery orders his men to keep pushing. The next morning brings unexpected news. Whilst traveling to the front line, Rommel's deputy Georg Stumm has come under fire and died from a heart attack. Rommel's already on his way back to take command. That evening sees the first major tank engagement as German panzer divisions move to counter British breakthroughs. Montgomery's successfully drawn in the German tanks, but his armor's still bogged down in the minefields. As time goes on, it becomes clear the original battle plan isn't working. Something has to change. A new strategy emerges. Concentrate a single attack at a weak point where German and Italian forces meet. Meanwhile, Australian forces near the coast will make diversionary attacks to keep Axis forces occupied. On October 25th, those attacks begin. Fierce fighting sees the Australians capture Point 29, an important hill, but upon his return, Rommel immediately orders a counterattack that stops their advance. By the 26th, 30th Corps finally has a bridgehead through the minefields, capturing a key position known as Kidney Ridge. Montgomery's grinding down Axis forces, but the attack has lost momentum. Rommel decides to counterattack the next day, bringing the 21st Panzer Division up from the south, but determined fire from anti-tank batteries near Kidney Ridge forces them to give up. Rommel plans another attack the following day, but his forces are broken up by Allied air power. The Desert Air Force aircraft are equipped as fighter bombers, able to tackle ground forces with bombs and cannon. It's a stark contrast to Luftwaffe and Italian tactics, which focus more on earthware combat. At crucial points, the Allies can call in devastating air support. Further Australian attacks by the coast are foiled by the arrival of the German 90th Light Division moving in from reserve. But that move concentrates all German armor to the north of Kidney Ridge, leaving Rommel's infantry exposed. To keep things that way, Australian attacks continue, while Montgomery prepares the killing blow, Operation Supercharge. In the early morning of November 2nd, Operation Supercharge begins. British and New Zealand infantry are sent north, toward the main Axis base, opening a gap for 10th Corps tanks. It's the most intense fighting of the battle. Infantry advance behind a slow-moving creeping barrage, providing protection as they move into enemy positions. It's attritional warfare reminiscent of the Western Front in the First World War. Casualties mount, but Allied numerical superiority means they eventually break through. A massive tank battle erupts as 10th Corps moves clear of the mines. Germans and Italians put up strong defense, inflicting heavy casualties. But Rommel knows he has to retreat despite orders from Hitler not to. He sends in his last reserve of Italian armor to cover his escape. Despite their best efforts, the Italian armor can't stem the tide and suffers devastating losses. As motorized German units withdraw, they leave behind Italian infantry with no means of escape. It est one of the lasting images of the battle, end. Lines of Italian infantry waiting to be rounded up as prisoners of war. With Axis forces on the run, the exhausted 8th Army attempts pursuit, but simply has nothing left. When heavy rains arrive on November 6th, the pursuit bogs down, and the Second Battle of Alamein ends. The victory appears to be a major turning point. Winston Churchill orders bells rung across Britain for the first time in years, saying, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." The battle was costly for both sides, but Allied superiority had eventually told. Victory was achieved by the force with greater material strength, better logistics, and more skilled tactics. Much of this could be attributed to Montgomery, who set the agenda for how the battle should be fought. A few days later, Allied forces would land in French Morocco and Algeria, with American troops taking part in the war in the West for the first time. The 8th Army would continue pursuing Rommel up the coast, forcing him to fight on two fronts. Alamein proved something crucial. With proper preparation, superior resources, and competent leadership, the Allies could beat Germany's best. The tide had turned. The question was no longer if the Allies would win, but when. So what do you reckon was the most crucial factor in Montgomery's victory? Was it the intelligence advantage? The numerical superiority? The brilliant deception operations? Or simply wearing down an exhausted enemy through sheer attrition? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the war's pivotal battles, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories from history's greatest conflicts. See you in the next one.